Because here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Nations almost never collapse because they run out of money. They collapse because they lose credibility. And once that happens, the fall accelerates faster than any government can stop it. To understand why, we need to rewind to the moment when the modern idea of national debt was born. For most of human history, governments were limited by something physical. Gold in a vault, silver in circulation, land under control, trade routes protected by force. If a ruler wanted to spend more, they needed to tax more, conquer more, or extract more from the economy in front of them. There were constraints, brutal ones, but constraints nonetheless, that began to change in early modern Europe. By the late 1600s and early 1700s, a revolutionary idea was spreading through financial circles. A state didn't need to fully possess wealth today if it could credibly promise wealth tomorrow. Future tax revenue could be transformed into present-day spending. Debt, if managed carefully, could become a permanent tool of power rather than a temporary emergency measure. One of the most famous and infamous experiments with this idea came in France under the influence of John Law. Law didn't invent public debt, and he didn't invent paper money. But he did push both concepts further than any government had before. This marked a turning point. Modern governments could now spend in ways that would have been impossible in earlier centuries. Wars could be financed without immediate taxation. Welfare states could expand rapidly. Debt in this system wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. And for a long time, it worked. The danger emerges not when debt exists, but when it becomes structurally necessary. At first, borrowing is framed as temporary and strategic. Reconstruction, development, stabilization. Politicians promise growth will outpace obligations. If borrowing didn't cause pain yesterday, why should it tomorrow? Spending increases again. Gradually, the logic flips. Debt is no longer a tool used occasionally, it becomes the foundation holding the system upright. At this point, the economy doesn't just use debt. It depends on it. The public rarely notices this transition. The benefits of borrowing are immediate and visible. The costs are distant and abstract. But beneath the surface, a critical imbalance forms. Obligations grow faster than productive capacity. Interest payments begin to compound. The margin for error shrinks. This is the moment history shows us again and again, not when collapse happens, but when it becomes possible. What ultimately triggers financial failure is not a lack of money, resources, or even growth. It is a loss of belief. Investors begin to question whether future income will really cover future promises. Creditors demand higher interest. Ratings agencies downgrade confidence. Capital becomes cautious, then nervous, then scarce. The process can unfold slowly, as it did in Japan after the 1990s asset bubble burst. Japan did not default, its institutions held. But decades of stagnation followed, as debt weighed on growth and confidence never fully recovered. Sometimes the process is chaotic. Argentina offers a textbook case of what happens when foreign currency debt, inflation, and political instability collide. Once confidence broke, the country found itself unable to roll over obligations, forcing defaults, currency collapses, and repeated resets, and sometimes the shift is sudden. Greece's crisis in 2010 wasn't caused by an overnight shortage of money, but by an overnight collapse in trust. Once markets believed Greek debt was unsustainable, borrowing became conditional, then punitive, then nearly impossible without external control. In every case, the same thing failed first: credibility. Once confidence cracks, governments face impossible choices: cut spending and risk economic contraction, raise taxes and suppress productivity, print money and fuel inflation, borrow more and provoke panic. Each response solves one problem while worsening another. The system enters a feedback loop where policy options narrow just as pressure intensifies. This is why financial collapse feels so chaotic from the outside. It isn't caused by one bad decision, but by years of accumulated fragility finally exposed. History also reveals another uncomfortable truth: attempted solutions often deepen the damage. Debt restructurings preserve cash flow, but destroy trust. Austerity stabilizes budgets, but shrinks economies. Monetary expansion delays defaults, but erodes purchasing power. None of these tools are inherently evil, but once credibility is gone, their effectiveness collapses. Now zoom out to the present. Global debt has reached levels that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Public, private, and corporate obligations combined dwarf global economic output. Major economies rely on constant refinancing. Interest rates ripple across borders instantly. Confidence is no longer national, it's systemic. The United States, Japan, Europe, China, and dozens of developing nations all operate within a web of promises that only works as long as belief holds. This does not mean collapse is inevitable. History shows that systems can adapt, restructure, and transform. But it also shows that when trust erodes across multiple major players simultaneously, the adjustment is never smooth. Every financial order eventually reaches a point where old assumptions stop working. The gold standard broke. Bretton Woods collapsed. New systems replaced them. The danger today is not debt itself. It is the scale, speed, and synchronization of reliance on belief. So remember this: nations don't fall because money disappears. Money can always be created. What cannot be printed is credibility. Debt is not destructive by nature. But when it grows faster than the economy supporting it, the math becomes unforgiving. And financial crises are never purely numerical events. They are human ones, driven by incentives, denial, political pressure, and the refusal to confront limits until they become unavoidable. History doesn't repeat perfectly. But when the same structures produce the same stresses, the rhyme is impossible to ignore. So the real question isn't whether individual countries can fail. It's this: what happens when a global system built on trust begins to question itself? If you want more deep dives like this, stories hidden beneath charts, headlines, and official reassurances, subscribe to Historic Finance Lab. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop questioning the systems shaping your life.